How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. So the topic of the day is basically three parts. We're going to talk about field sobriety tests
Okay.
and what the uh, average Colorado law-abiding citizen needs to know in order to uh, know what to do in that case, and how to think about the point .08 limit and what to do if the officer asks you about breath tests.
Okay.
And maybe you can also touch on the marijuana side of things as well.
Okay.
And how that would differ from alcohol, which would be the most common way to think about it.
Okay.
So let's start out by talking about field sobriety tests. What do people need to know?
Okay. First of all, the thing about field sobriety tests that you need to know is that you don't know anything about them. You don't know what they're looking at. That's the problem. There's a battery of tests, and the ones that they're using that they primarily use are walk and turn. We've all heard of that one. A one-leg stand. Some people have heard of that. And this thing called horizontal gaze nystagmus, which is looking at the eyes. And then there's another thing they use called a portable breath testing device called a PBT. All right. Now, when the officer first starts this whole thing, he's going to ask you, are you willing to do some voluntary roadside maneuvers so I know you're okay to drive home? And the word voluntary is in there, but you're probably not going to hear it. I would, if it were me, say, are these voluntary? I'd ask him that question. Is this voluntary? Do I have to do this? And he's supposed to say no. And then the answer is, well, then politely, I would choose to decline with respect. I think that's the best way to do it. The reality is that you don't know what they're looking at. First of all, you don't know what they're testing for. Secondly, the test, you don't know exactly what they're seeing. You don't know if what they write down is actually even accurate. Oftentimes people will turn down the roadsides, and you don't need to make an excuse. Maybe people say, well, I have bad knees, so I don't want to do that. And they'll say, well, just let me look at your eyes then. I don't even, that eye test. I mean, I don't even start with that. And the answer should be simply, with respect, no, I don't want to do that. How many people do you know would accept to try and take a test which they have never studied for? They don't even know what they're being graded on. They don't even understand the subject. Who's going to agree to a test like that when this much hangs in the balance? Their relative freedom. So if that's the case, this is important. If it's important, then say, well, no, I'm not ready to take a test. I don't want you to say those words. What I want you to say is, ask and confirm, are these voluntary? And if indeed they are voluntary, then I respectfully decline. That would be the best answer you can give in a difficult situation.
Excellent. And should you mention anything about your attorney at that point or not?
Well, you can certainly, they're going to ask you, this whole colloquy is going to begin with, I smell alcohol. Have you been drinking tonight, sir? And look, I'm a lawyer. I can't advise someone to lie to a cop. It's against the law to lie to a cop. On the other hand, if you confess or make any admission, even subtle, I was drinking, but much earlier, well, all those are going to be used against you. I'm going to see that report later. It's going to say admits to drinking. That box will be checked. That's one less thing they need. That's one more thing they have for probable cause. One less thing for the officer to worry about. So that means you've already confessed. So it's a very tough question. The answer isn't going to work if you say, well, I've only had 2 beers. It's not going to work. So everyone tries that, and it doesn't work for anyone. So instead of answering that question, at that point, you probably should answer that very difficult question with, well, I'm not uncomfortable answering questions put like this unless my lawyer's present. And then
right.
And you run the risk of making him or her mad. Well, officers don't like their authority challenged, and many are going to see that as a challenge. So you're going to have to try and phrase it. It's a tough spot to be in. And how you choose to phrase that, I leave it to you. I would suggest that do it respectfully, quietly, and not in a challenging way.
Right. That sounds great. Now, what if the officer asks you to step out of the vehicle for a field sobriety test?
All right.
What should you do?
Okay. Well, the Colorado law is that you have to give your license, registration, proof of insurance. You have to, upon request. And then if the officer asks you to step out of the car, you have to comply. You have to open the door and get out of the car. But that's all you have to do. And I would think, and I would like people who are stopped to understand the limits of what the officer can and can't do. And I don't think you have to challenge them on these. Again, there's no point in starting an argument with a guy who's wearing a gun and can arrest you. You're going to lose that argument. So don't argue. Just be firm and say, well, I respectfully, do I have to do that? And I'm telling you now, you have to get out of the car if he asks you. So just get out, and get out of your car. Try not to lean on the car. Any action you take getting out of a car, they're going to be looking at that, and they're say, well, lean on the car for support, which everybody does, by the way, and I'm fine with that. We can handle that issue. But then thereafter, I would ask that if clarify if it's voluntary. If the officer indicates it is, then decline. This is up to the point of arrest. Once you're arrested and advised of express consent and told you have a right to a breath or blood or breath test, that's a wholly different matter. And
Right.
I can talk about that too.
Okay. And what about marijuana? How does that, if you're asked to do, are there sobriety tests for marijuana? Does that even exist?
Yes, they do. I don't agree that they're accurate, but there are officers who are certified to provide. They're called drug recognition experts, and every Colorado court I know has found them and admitted them as experts, and they can come in and testify. Well, here's the test I did, and these indicate to me that this person was under the influence of marijuana, and they involve looking at your eyelids, estimating times, crazy stuff, and those roadsides you should ask, clarify, are these voluntary? Officer says yes, then say, well, then I'm sorry, I'm not going to comply with that request, or respectfully I decline. Right.
Same
thing.
Okay, fair enough. And if you go ahead and say that to the officer, what's likely to happen? What would you imagine the officer would reply?
I think he's going to tell you to put your hands behind your back, turn around, and he's going to put handcuffs on you. Okay. That's what I expect to happen. You're not. The reality you have to accept is that DUI enforcement is such a priority, and any amount of alcohol that is on board or marijuana, they're going to move forward with a full-blown investigation. Some officers might, and I've heard that even now, they'll give you these roadsides, and I've heard people say, well, I passed those roadsides. People tell me that, but they don't tell me that very often. And in fact, people tell me they passed the roadsides and then they're arrested. I'm like, well, obviously you didn't pass. And they all think they did. Everybody thinks they did. Trust me, you didn't. There's very few right answers, and you might luck out, but really you're not. And since I'm talking to a lot of people, not just one person, the clear answer is don't give them that, because you're going to fail it. And so you can't stop that from happening. They're going to arrest you. They have to proceed with the DUI investigation. To do that, they have to arrest you. And then you're going to be advised of the express consent law, and then you're going to be asked to take either a blood or a breath. And that's where you want to be very clear about what you want to do from that point. And you want the blood, right? Not the breath? I prefer blood. Some people are squeamish. I don't care. I want the blood. Blood is more accurate. Some experts don't think and challenge the accuracy of that breath test machine, that unit that they use. I tend to share that view sometimes. I have an expert I know who will tell you that they think it's a good indicator that alcohol is present, but the level, they don't believe it. It's proprietary. It's owned by a private company who makes money selling that to police agencies all over the state. So they're the only ones who test their equipment. They're the ones saying it works pretty good, and they're the ones making money from it. I don't like it. I prefer a blood test. First of all, they'll take 2 tubes of blood. They'll actually measure alcohol, which the breath test does not. And they'll give me 2 samples, and the second one I can send to a different lab and have tested separately. And there's some other reasons I like blood better, including chain of custody. Also considering the fact that, say you're going to be over 0.08, they're not going to have the result back that night, so they won't take your license right then and there. It's shocking enough experience to go through. Say they take you to detox and you get out that morning, and at least you can drive home, and at least they haven't taken your license. Right. So I think in all those ways, blood to me is the clear choice. So even if you're squeamish around needles, go for blood every single time, because that's my takeaway is say no more. It's blood. It is. You're going to be stuck with that breath test result, and I have experts who say they don't like it, but juries love them, and And so it's a very, I've won that defense. It's a challenging defense to challenge the breath test on its merits, say this thing doesn't work very well, and bring an expert in to say it's expensive, it's hard, and I've won them cases, but that's a dogfight. So I'd rather go with the blood.
I say make it easy on your DUI attorney.
Yes.
So the next question is drunk versus the .08 limit. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I've been around a while. Okay, so I was around back when that being over 0.1 was considered to be intoxicated. And actually, I tried a case as a prosecutor. 1 week it was 0.1, and the expert comes in and says, based on my expert thing, anyone over 0.1 is intoxicated. The next week he was saying 0.08. Same guy. So the reality is that we accepted federal highway matching dollars and lowered our limit to 0.08 based on federal pressure. For whatever you think about that, that's the law. But what juries get is an instruction. You may presume that someone over 0.08 is intoxicated. Now, you may not be. And a lot of smart lawyers are winning those cases saying, no, he's only impaired, he's not intoxicated, and winning the trial. And so they made a separate law saying it's against the law to drive with a BAC over 0.08. So it's a separate way to tag you. So even if you're not intoxicated, you can still get charged with what's called DUI per se, which is driving with a BAC over 0.08. The 0.08 also comes into play with the DMV because over 0.08, that's where they take your license. If you test with blood or breath and give a 0.079, they're not going to take your license unless you get convicted of a DUI, which takes 12 points, or a DWA and a combination of points, which makes a total of 12. So 0.08 is an important level. It's an indicator, and around that level, a good lawyer, a sharp lawyer, can do a lot with that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that a lot of people know how to find out this information, but how does someone know that they're, at or near 0.08? Like how many beers or drinks or glasses of wine would get you there?
Well,
on the average, would you say?
Okay, well, we've all heard that you can have one drink an hour, or words to that effect. The problem is that, for example, the size of drinks. How many shots are you getting in that margarita? You have no idea. A lot of microbrewery beer, which is all over Colorado now, comes at a lot higher alcohol content than
right.
Budweiser. So those tracking methods are not reliable enough for me as a lawyer to suggest that you rely on that. I don't think that's a good idea. I think that your judgment is going to be impaired if you're impaired, and you're not going to know if you're okay to drive. So, and the same thing goes for counting and keeping track. It's just a challenge for somebody. And if you're that much aware of it and concerned about it all this time, then it's pretty easy to be concerned enough to just get yourself down there a different way, or go where you're going and get home a different way, and Uber it or take a cab or get a friend to drive you. Got
it. And I guess the last question here is specifically about breath tests. Let's say, someone finds themselves in a situation, they were coerced, or they went with the breath test for whatever reason.
A lot of people do.
Yeah. And so what's your advice at that point?
Okay, so with the breath test result, that they're going to take immediate action. If you're over 0.08, they're taking your license right then and there. Most law enforcement agencies in Colorado have the latest device. It's the Intoxilizer 9000 EN. It makes you blow twice, so it gives you two separate test results with a 1 minute or 2 minute interval in between. And it can be challenged. As I say, juries love that machine because it takes the pressure off of them. Instead of you being a hardworking single mom, or a dad who's a plumber who works really hard and really needs his license because he has to drive around for work, instead of that guy, you're a 0.092 or a 0.17 or something like that. So that enters into it. I also there are experts who don't like this machine who will come in and say, this isn't. The problems with it are that it's a private industry that runs that, and they don't let other people look at it and check it. They themselves haven't opened it up to peer review. It's actually what's called the spectrophotometer. Spectrophotometry has been around for a long time. There's lots of spectrophotometers that work, but this one.
What does that mean, spectrophotometer?
Oh, well, this is interesting science. This is the shining of a laser through your breath, and it measures how much of that laser was absorbed. And the presumption is, The presumption is that the alcohol in your breath is what was absorbing the laser beam. And of course, alcohol attaches to carbon dioxide. So when you breathe out, it's attaching to that. And this breath test machine makes you blow into it for a long time, and you have to hold it. And so after a while, it causes an oxygen debt inside your body, so that most of the air being expelled from your body is actually carbon dioxide is coming, and your body's doing this gas exchange, trying to take whatever's oxygen left in your body and it's blowing it all as CO2, and alcohol is attaching to that. And so the laser beam shining through it, supposedly, and this is the theory, is absorbed by that. And then they take a calculation and say, well, everyone's pretty much the same. So based on that premise, everyone's pretty much the same. They use a formula to turn the amount of absorption into a BAC. So it's not actually measuring alcohol, you see. It's measuring absorption of a laser. Blood test actually measures the burning of ETOH, which is the alcohol that's inside your body.
Interesting. Wow, that's very futuristic. Laser beam science.
More than anybody wanted to know.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. And it also does, it makes sense what you're saying about the blood test being more reliable. And if anyone is unfortunate enough to find themselves in a situation, again, I would take your advice and go with the blood test.
In advance.
In advance, just burn that into your mind. So that's great. So on this topic of the day, any parting wisdom that you think people should walk away with today?
Well, I mean, I think the message is that be aware that DUI enforcement is the #1 law enforcement priority. It's a big deal. They want to bust on these, and that's what they're doing at night. They have more officers on duty at night, and they're not there to make sure you don't speed. Those guys are only doing DUI enforcement. So just be aware that that's what they're looking for. And this is increasing, and the penalties are increasing every year. It takes my breath away. I've been doing this 21 years, and when I started to where I'm at now, I can't believe what people are getting. And that's only the beginning. This is going to get worse. So I have to urge people, if you can, think in advance and don't get in the situation. If you are, then hey, don't panic. Don't go online and diagnose yourself. You're going to hear a lot of bad news. Just call a lawyer. Anyone who does this, who's competent, will give you a free consult. And give me a call, and we'll talk about your situation. And don't panic. I'd say, let's take it a step at a time. But the ideal scenario is not to be in that situation in the first place.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure everyone's very grateful to hear all this very valuable information. And we'll be speaking to you very soon, David. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye.